Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight, I am joined by the best-selling author of five novels, including the most recent instant bestseller, Parents' Weekend, and whose work has been translated into 25 languages. His very first novel was the breakout hit, Every Last Fear. That's right, it's your favorite writer of mine, Alex Finlay. Alex, how the heck are you?
I'm great, great. Thanks for having me, Robert. And you're no slouch yourself in the writing department. So it's
I
an honor to.
appreciate it. So I don't know why this sticks in my head. Do you remember the first time we met? I'm sure you probably don't because you meet a lot of people, but for whatever
No,
reason, I remember the first time I
I have a
met you.
recollection. Let me guess.
Okay.
The Fest Bar,
What's that?
The Thriller Fest Bar. We had a conversation there about publishing.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah,
A couple years
yeah.
ago now was my very first Thriller Fest, and it's like I was telling I think it was Jason Rokulik when he initially was asking me like, well, what's Thriller Fest like? Because he was his first year, there last year, and of course he won for his great book, the Last Month Wedding,
Mhm.
and I was like, it's like camp, really. It's like BoucherCon is fun and it's great. It's a lot of, and obviously it's majority of readers, which obviously as a writer you want to be at, but Thriller Fest is, I would say 95%, if not more, just writers and other publishing professionals. And so it's just kind of it's like camp. You go and you see your friends. And my first year there, I don't know. I remember being in the lobby and spotting you over, and I was like, because we had I think your book came out around the time my Avery Bishop Girl Gone Mad had come out, and we had been kind of doing interviews at the same places. I think we may have even shared the same like outside publicist at the time. Kathleen, does that sound right?
I didn't have an outside publicist, but I
Okay,
know it's
so well,
Kathleen.
anyway,
But
you
but
were doing a lot of the same type of stuff, so I was like, oh, okay, and I knew that Alex Finlay was a pen name, and I'm very having Avery Bishop as a pen name, so I just went up and said hi, and we were talking. I think you were like paying the check because I guess you had lunch or whatever else, and I don't even know how
oh,
it came up,
sure.
but and we're gonna get more into this, but you told me essentially how you draft. Like I don't even know how it came, but I think because you talked about how like you're still an active lawyer, and I'm like, well, how do you manage to do the writing? And again, we're gonna get into all of that. But you told me how you do the drafting. I don't know if you still do that, but it just it stayed with me because it's insane how you do that. So before we get into any of that, um, as we mentioned, Alex Finley obviously is what you've been publishing under, but that is not your initial name. You had published a few books under a different name, which those books are still out there. I actually saw there was a Kindle deal the other day for I think
Wow.
your third novel, which I made sure to promptly grab, The
Wow.
Outsider. So can we get
Wow.
into, I guess, Anthony Franz, if I, correct me if I'm wrong, is your real
Yeah.
name. You
Mhm.
published three novels under that name before, you know, becoming the best-selling Alex Finley. So can we talk a little bit about kind of that journey? Um,
Yeah.
it's no secret, I think, you're a lawyer. You've been part of arguments in front of the Supreme Court, I think just recently or somewhat recently. So like you have a serious day job. Like I even said that to David Ellis. I said a lot of writers have day jobs,
Yeah.
but like I was like, David, you have like a serious day job. Like,
Well, Dave, Dave's a buddy of mine, and I always joke like, I can't believe you're a judge. Like, it's shocking to me given what I know about you. But
right,
no,
right,
but
right.
I'm kidding. David Ellis. For those who don't know, is great writer, but he is a appellate judge, and that's kind of what we were at a conference together, and immediately, like my wife says, it's like two 16-year-old kids when we get together. So, to answer your question, yeah, I'm Anthony Francis is my real name. And I spent a good 10 years trying to get published while I was practicing law. And uh it's I had young kids. I was a younger lawyer, and that's at a big law firm in DC. Those are kind of the years where you're working, really insane hours. So it was really an intense experience for me, and a lot of rejection. Like, I mean, just agents and when I get an agent, every publisher in New York, the first book I ever wrote, which has still not been published. Um, and so I ended up at some point, well, it's going on more than a decade now. Um, I got my publishing deal with a big publisher, and I thought, oh, I've made it. This is it. All this hard work, and that's just not how it goes. The books earned out, which those who follow publishing knows that it's basically they pay you in advance, and you're hoping to at least make their money that they invested back. But my advance was so low that it wasn't a high bar to set. Um, and so I wrote these three books that I'm still pretty proud of. I mean, they were set in the universe that I practice in, which is this. I'm an appellate lawyer, and I do cases before the Supreme Court. And I was always fascinated by the Supreme Court is in its own way like a small town. Like it's in this building, this kind of majestic Roman temple-like structure on 1 Street in DC. But at the end of the day, it's the community is very insular. It's got like 300 people who work in the building. There's a cafeteria, there's a gift shop, and everybody knows each other. And the lawyers also kind of, we don't know everybody, but we're pretty, it's a group where you cross paths with the same people. And um I had always thought, well, this would be a good place for kind of a small town mystery, but where the stakes are, much higher in the court. And so I wrote these three books, and um, I did more research. I know more about the Supreme Court and its like traditions and all the quirky things about the building and all these things than probably anybody from these books alone. But they just didn't find an audience. And looking back on it now, um, I think that it's harder than ever now, but even back then, it was, it's always difficult to break through the crowd. And, but I was doing like, there's only so many people who like to read thrillers, um, of all the reading people. And then if you say, okay, well, that's this group out of this group. And then I was doing legal thrillers. So we're already segmenting the audience. And then I was basing them in this kind of very all of them based in this US Supreme Court and community. So I was already here. So it was very niche in a way.
Yeah.
And
Well, I want to
so
ask you about that. So, like, I think I may have had the conversation with David Ellison. I mean, having been a lawyer, is it one of those things where and you want to be a writer, is just the natural progression is I'm going to write a legal thriller. Do we know any lawyers who basically never have written a legal thriller? Like, or is that just because it's like kind of goes along that, like, write what you know type thing?
well, I think that's what it was for me. And it was a terrible decision, not a terrible decision because I learned a lot writing these books. I got into the ITW, which you said Thriller Fest, which, I met so many people who are still friends today. And it got me into the writing world. Even when I wrote those books, I always thought of myself as like, I'm a lawyer who wrote these novels on the side. It wasn't until the Alex Finlay books that I really identified myself as a writer,
Yeah.
who practices law. Um, but yeah, I think that was absolutely part of it, right? What you get this right, what you know. But for me, it wasn't until my agent basically there was an the third Fran's book was done, and I was out of contract, and I wrote a fourth legal thriller based in the Supreme Court. And my agent, who's just phenomenal, and I've been with her forever, and I will never leave her unless she dumps me. Um, she basically said, like, look, we can sell this, but you say you want to progress in this business, you want to break out, you want to do all these things. Have you considered trying something that's not a legal thriller at all? And I had just happened to be going on a vacation to Tulum, Mexico, a couple weeks later. And while I was there, I had the idea for what became Every Last Fear, which is a book that starts with the death of nearly an entire family under suspicious circumstances in Tulum, Mexico, as a result. Um, And so
And
it
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to
sorry,
say
I'm
too,
rambling. Okay.
great first line too. They found the bodies on a Tuesday.
What's my favorite line I've ever written? So I'm
Was
glad you
that,
guys
I
brought
mean,
it
was
in.
that like when did that come about? Was that immediately in your head? You knew from the very beginning, or was that in drafting
It
it?
was
You kind
the
of,
it was the first line I wrote. I remember writing it. I was in for those who haven't read the book begins in Tulum, Mexico. Basically, this family who's on vacation, um, we learned that they haven't no one's heard from them for several days, and the police are called to this vacation rental. It looks like there's been a gas leak or a carbon monoxide situation, and the family's you know, passed away. And it looks just like an accident. And the main character of the book is their surviving son, who's an NYU student. And at the time, I had an NYU student son. I went on vacation with with the rest of my family, and it was a long day at the beach. At the end of the day, my younger kids, they'd been in the sun. They were kind of passed out in this living room of this resort. My wife drank too much wine. She was passed out, and it was dark. It was an eco resort, so the lights all went out at 10 o'clock. And I had my laptop, and everybody kind of looked like they were like dead. And I was like, what, what would happen if we all perished here? And what would my irresponsible, lovable kind of son do if that happened? And that was the genesis of the book. And I typed, they found the body. It was a Tuesday. They found the body on bodies on a Tuesday, and it just kind of went from there. So it was, my main message of this is like that book changed everything for me in my writing career. And it was really a testament to, you know, don't get stuck into write what you know. Just write kind of, the book that feels right for you. But don't get boxed into feeling like you have to, if you're a journalist, you have to write a main character who's a journalist. If you're a lawyer, a main character, a journalist, etc.
yeah. Well, and I do want to obviously get more into the Alex Finlay books, especially the transition because and I've had Todd Ritter on before, who the world knows as Riley Sager. He had written
Mhm.
under his own name and then actually written
He was
under a
in my
different pen
debut
name.
class.
And
He was in my debut class at ITW. We both had
oh,
our own.
well, yeah. So, I mean,
Funny.
so part of the sometimes when you have to kind of reinvent yourself is really just a literal reinvent yourself with a new name, mostly for, publishing purposes for bookstores because it's a terrible thing, but, sales will follow you forever. And it could be an amazing book, but for whatever reason, people are like, well, these sales, the last book didn't sell as well, so we're not going to carry, blah, blah, blah. Before we get into all of that, though, I really always like to try to kind of like, go back. So like, do you remember the very first creative thing you have done? I mean, you mentioned, being a lawyer and kind of writing on the side. Um, when did you start to have that inkling that, oh, this is something I might, at the very least, like to kind of do as a hobby?
Yeah, well, I had been in rock bands, 80s and 90 early 90s rock bands that had the whole hair and the whole thing. That's how I paid my way through college. And I was in bands throughout high school. So that was kind of my creative outlet. And when, the reality that we weren't that good, I wasn't good enough to make it in that because that was what I thought when I was in high school. I wasn't even planning to go to college. I thought I was going to be in rock bands and that's how I was going to pay, support my life. Um, but at some point, as you mature and you kind of start to get self-realization, it became obvious that wasn't going to happen. And so I basically put the creative side of me, aside and went to law school, started practicing law. And about, I don't know, 4 years into practicing law, I had my first child, my son, and I was up really late at night with him. And I don't know. I thought I'd played around with writing, not music, but writing stories, when I was younger. But I thought, it'd be fun to write a novel. I'm up late. I might as well do something with my time. And that's what got the ball rolling for me. And I have vivid memories of him sitting on my lap and me typing at like 2 in the morning. And that I finished that first novel doing that. It didn't sell. It's the one I mentioned earlier,
Right,
but
but
it
did
got
you
me a taste for it.
had you done anything like, I mean, jumping straight into a novel, like, I mean, nowadays, having written several novels, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm just working on another book. But to be the very first thing, I mean, that can be very, very intimidating. Like, had you done any short stories or anything prior to that, or just it
No,
was like, I'm going to write a novel?
total the arrogance of youth, you know. I just went into it. It took me forever to write to finish it. I would do it like I was traveling a lot as a young lawyer. I would write on planes, and that's where you referred to kind of my current process. It's where it started, which was I would I live in DC. I would take the subway to the office. So on the way into the office, I would tap scenes away on my then BlackBerry, now iPhone, but and on the way home, I would do the same thing, basically sending emails to myself of these scenes. And that was the only time I had. And so it started this process of which now I can't escape. Like I have tried to be a more conventional writer, but I write the first draft of every scene in every novel, every Finlay novel on my phone. I don't and during the pandemic, I didn't realize how ingrained it was in me. But during the pandemic, I was having a difficult time. Every Last Fear was written before the pandemic. It came out, during the pandemic. But I had the second book to get done, and I'm like, I was just struggling to get it done. And I realized I wasn't walking. I was at home, and I wasn't going to doing the subway thing. And so I just ended up starting, even in the winter, I would bundle up in big coats. I would go on these super long walks down Connecticut Avenue in DC um, and write the scenes. And that's how I got the second book done.
Wow. You should
And
have
I know it's
invested
like,
in a, treadmill desk, maybe.
well, I have a treadmill. I now when it's cold out, I use a treadmill, but I just can't not. And it's not. It's hard to explain. And my friend Sarah Pekkanen, a great writer, she loves to give me grief about it and bring it up whenever she can because it does make me sound like a total beach book hack. But for me, it's not like I draft the scene on my phone and then I'm done. It's really just before I write, and I don't know how you do it, Robert. Like I'm not a conventional outliner where I plan everything out, but I do think about like where the book's heading, and I know the scene, at least conceptually and probably dialogue in my head before I ever start writing. And um, for me, it's almost transcribing what I've already kind of written in my head when I do these. But the other piece of it for me is I just at the end of a week of doing that, I have a good 20 pages that I take from an email and put into a Word document. And 95% of it's crap, but it takes away the intimidation of sitting down at my desk and actually starting to do the real work, which is the editing and refining. So it's worked. I haven't been able to get away from it, and I'm, working on the next book on my phone, first draft.
So, and we're getting really geeky and technical here. So, has it always just been an email, or are you doing it in like
Yeah, it's always been. I've
via
I've
notes
heard.
or like Google
Yeah.
Docs or anything like that?
I've gotten every bit of advice of how I could do it more efficiently, and there are many ways. And I've tried some of them, dictation, where it transcribes as you dictate, all these things. My wife's worried I'm getting hit by a car, so it's because I actually am thumbing it like as I walk. Um, but it's just, I'm an old guy, bald guy. I'm just old habits. It was and continues to be emails. And I email it to myself. So then I have a record of it. It's not going anywhere. It's never going to get deleted. And I take all the emails at the end of the week and put them into a Word document. And sometimes I do go back to the emails, like if I've cut something and I'm like, you know what, I kind of liked it was before. I have at least a rough scene of what it was in my email. So you can like take all my emails for every book, and you could almost see the story in probably 100 something emails.
So, between paragraphs, do you do kind of like a hard break, or are you like, because there's not really, I guess, a tab. You know what I mean? Like, how are you?
Yeah.
doing that?
I have little symbols I use to designate, but usually for me, it's like I write a scene and then I'm done. Like that's, the
I guess the question is
long,
like, are you doing like interactions between characters and dialogues, stuff like
oh
that?
yeah, yeah. I do all that, but I don't, it's a mess. It's missing words. It doesn't, we have, the quotation marks. So it's almost really difficult to edit it in some ways because I don't always read the missing words because, when it's your work, it's already hard to edit a little bit. But yeah, so even now, like I just got the first pass pages of my next novel and I'm already noticed like missing words, and it's all because the phone and the way I did it. And this is after it's gone through copy editors and all
Yeah.
these people. So yeah,
I mean, honestly, whatever works for you, and that's a thing. I mean, you're part of the craft fest. I know that you probably don't really kind of deal with this, but for a lot of, I guess, newbie authors or aspiring authors, there is no right way to do anything. It's whatever you figure, whatever you find works best for you. So
yeah,
good.
yeah,
I'm glad to
yeah.
hear that's still working for you.
Whatever gets you in the chair. Some people they get up, they're disciplined, they have a word count limit. Other people are,
Do you
are
try to like write so much throughout the week, like like send like at least one email a day or something to
no.
yourself?
I have no discipline other than as the deadline gets closer, the pressure builds, and I am much more productive. Um, but I always still have to trick myself. I'll have to be like, for one book, I had only a third of it written and it was due in 3 months. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Paris for a month and I'm just going to finish the book there. And I did. So you kind of got to trick yourself and do whatever it takes to get those words on the page. And I'm not one to tell anybody what's going to work because, when I was working, 80 hours a week, I had 15 minutes to write, and there's plenty of people who are working super hard, and you just have to kind of squeeze it in and find the thing that works for you to get it done. But no, if you don't, you're never gonna have a book. And I'm always amazed when I finish a book. I'm always like, wow, I just swore 2 weeks ago I thought I'd never this book was never getting done, and it's done. And I think it's just you do little things a lot, it adds up.
Yeah. So
What's your deal? Like, I mean, are you a pantser plotter? Are you, how do you get them done?
typically I would say pantser. I really don't like outlining. If I'm forced to outline, like if we're doing kind of like pitching somewhere, I try to keep it as interesting but also vague as possible. Like my recent Avery Bishop Audible original that came out, we initially sold that as a novella.
Mhm.
And once I started writing, I realized, well, the only way we're going to make this, it will be effective is I have to bring in a whole nother point of view, which actually basically made it twice as long. And I would not have known that, had I, just in that outlines stage of things. It wasn't until I actually really started getting into it because I love, discovering, like you think, oh, as the author, I know exactly where this story is going, and all of a sudden a character says something, does something that is that completely, is unexpected. That completely throws you as the author for a loop, and it feels like, well, if it's going to surprise me, it's definitely going to surprise the reader.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I always love not really knowing. Although and then I guess maybe it's the same for you. I mean, do you typically have an idea of like where you think the book is going to end up, or I mean, even like with Every Last Fear, you talked about how you had, you had that first line, you had that image, and like at what point did you really start to did that story really start to crystallize in your head where you really had an endpoint?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. It's funny, the beginning of that book wrote itself, and we sold it on 100 pages. Like the publisher, same publisher I was at under my own name, but they they saw something in it, and so they bought it before it was done, which was great, but also bad because then I had to finish it, and I had no idea where it was going to go. And I remember having, couple months before deadline, I still didn't know who the villain or who the culprit was, and I had a friend in town, and we went out to dinner, and we kind of he's he's a big reader, and I kind of explained where I was and I just didn't know and the different options. And he didn't have a solution, but just having that discussion with him kind of gave me the light bulb moment where I wrapped it up. Um, so I love to know where the ending is, but because I do think it is much more efficient. You don't have to go back and scrap a lot of things if you know the end and know who the culprit is. But to your point, um, I love it when and it doesn't happen that often. When that thing happens when I'm on my phone and I'm like, wow, that happened. That's interesting. That fits in, that makes sense. And it's a surprise because, again, like you said, if it's a surprise to me, it's hopefully going to be a surprise to the reader. But it's just those are the magic moments. And for me, they happen once a book, maybe. Yeah, if I'm lucky, twice. But yeah.
So going back to your legal thrillers, what had you been reading at that time? Like, do you remember like the certain authors or types of books? I'm assuming at that time you had been reading because not many people just decide to write a novel out of nowhere.
Well, I mean, look, the first book I wrote, I was in law school. The Firm came out. Scott Turow's Presumed Innocent had come out a couple years before. The movies were coming out. Legal thrillers were all the rage, and so I read all of those. Richard North, and then not uncommon publishers when they saw those books take off, they basically you know, the market became saturated with all these legal thrillers. Many of them very good, many of them not. But I read a lot of them. And but I will say I've reread Scott Turow's Presumed Innocent and The Firm within the last 5 years, and they hold up. I mean, they're not. I couldn't write either of those books. They're very different from my style. But the fact that they were written so long ago and I know why they broke out. They just had something special about each of them. Um, and so those were the kind of books I was reading. But it wasn't like I wrote a book and it was like, oh, great. I wrote this book. Um, and it took me a couple years. And I got an agent very quickly, which is pretty rare. And
Yeah.
and the agent was one of these we're gonna give a bestseller and we're gonna sell it to Hollywood and all this stuff. So I thought this is great, and then um literally at the time everything was in paper. I because I'd see these rejection letters and I still have them. It's a stack of and it just didn't go anywhere. And so I at the time I had young children and I thought this is kind of a selfish thing I'm doing. It's kind of weird. Like, why do I think I have no experience in this at all? Why do I think anybody would want to buy a made up story I wrote? And it's not really fair to my kids that I'm spending all this time doing it. And so I just put it aside. And it was like 5 years. And then I got this idea for what became the first novel that sold, which was called The Last Justice. And I was practicing in the Supreme Court at the time quite a bit. But the opening page of the book, a gunman kills nearly the entire Supreme Court. And I had a real anxiety about how that was going to be received within my legal community. Are they going to put a picture of me up at the court? Are they, but shockingly, people got the lawyers in the Supreme Court community kind of got a kick out of it. And so that was the first book and it took me a long time to write. But the funny thing about it was is I had a 2 book deal. And so I thought, um, okay, well, I'm going to go back and, 2 book, great. They bought this one. I'm going to go back and pick up that first book I wrote, the Great American Novel that the agent loved and I thought was the best thing ever, and just give him that as a second book. And I went back and I read it and I was like, I can't believe I got an agent from this. It's terrible. The book had, it just wasn't that good. And so that was a good lesson in perspective and learning and growing as an author and all those things. But
Is that
I
agent
think
still around?
the agent has passed away and we had
Hmm.
parted ways. We had parted ways before that. And what is funny is the first The Last Justice, which was the first Franz book, was with that agent. And he passed away at the time. We just kind of parted ways. But um, my my current agent represented the second book, The Advocate's Daughter. And she's a mega agent. She represents all the, the Harlan Coben and all the big time authors. And she is absolutely amazing. But I moved a couple years ago, and you mentioned Thriller Fest. Whenever I go to Thriller Fest, I kind of take it as an opportunity with a publisher. It's in New York. I meet with my agent, and I was moving houses and I was cleaning out my basement, and I found the big stack of rejections for that first book, but also the stack of rejections from agents. And I found a rejection letter from my current agent, so I brought it to her and showed it to her, which was pretty. It's just pretty funny.
So it's not hidden anywhere. I mean, you can find it on the internet, but the cover for The Last Justice, um, it it's an okay cover, I guess,
No, it's a terrible cover. It's atrocious
but
cover.
it lists you as Anthony J. Franz. At what point? And then the last or the not the preceding, but whatever the last part, the
Yeah,
following two books,
yeah,
you
yeah,
drop the J. At what point? It always kind of, it's always interesting, kind of like you see sometimes the evolution of like an author's, name. Sometimes they'll include their middle name or they'll, so like,
yeah.
or even like Lou Burney, like his very first short story collection was Louis Burney. So, yeah, what was going on with the J?
Yeah, I've had a lot of name stuff going on. Well, the J was just in my legal briefs in my legal world. It is Anthony J. Franz for whatever reason. I don't know why. Um, and so that was the first book, and then I switched agents as I mentioned. And when we got a better deal from a really good publisher, which I'm with, St. Martin's Minotaur. Um, my agent was basically she had had some experience where you use the middle initial. It's awkward in some ways for covers because it's like sometimes you have to have the middle initial and then the name underneath. And so she basically recommended I drop the J, and so I did that. Didn't work. Like those books still didn't perform. But the real name issue for me was, as you mentioned, and you have a pen name, was the move from my real name to the Alex Finlay name, which was suggested by my publisher, presumably because they're always very polite and they make it sound like, well, this distinguishes legal thrillers from what you're doing now, which is really not that. And the truth of it is you have a sales record and it follows you. And I I didn't fully understand that, but they felt that we should do it. And at the time, I was just happy to be at the party. I was happy to have someone excited about my book. And I so it wasn't like an easy decision, but it was a great business decision at the end of the day. And I agree with that. And what I have found is that all the anxiety I used to have about when I go to court is what are people thinking about me? They probably weren't, but at the time, I always was self-conscious about my real name and my legal practice. And having this distance really just made me not really worry about any of that. I'm not writing legal thrillers, so it's a little easier too. But it also just helped me move from being the lawyer who wrote a novel to being a writer. And just my law practice, I don't really mention that I'm a lawyer in my materials. And I am a thriller writer, and it helped me kind of uh, make myself understand that because for years it was kind of like, is it a hobby? Is it this side hustle? Now it's like it's a career. It is my job. I still have a law job. But this is my job, and I'm a writer.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about just how'd you settle on Alex Finley? Were there different names initially that you had played around with, or can you talk a little bit about
Yeah, there
how
were,
you settled on that?
all the ones I came up with sounded kind of like a fake pen name, like Hunter or somebody, or like silly ones. And I'm lucky to have this agent who basically cuts through the crap and speaks very, very frankly to me, and that has served me well. Um, so at the end of the day, I think Alex Finley was on the publisher's list. I don't know. why. Um, it could be that I want to say that there's some view that like Fs are at eye level at bookstore, a lot of bookstores and the shelves. Also, it didn't hurt that at the time AJ Finn was breaking out, so I'd probably be next to him or Joe Finder. I have a vague kind of hazy recollection of that. I chose it because I just liked the sound of it, and it had my initials, and I thought that'd be easy, AF, and so that was basically the genesis of it. I don't know if they did any real market research on it or anything like that, but
Yeah.
but it was from their list, not mine. Mine were all ridiculous.
Right.
How'd you come up with
Um,
yours?
Actually going back to Todd Ritter, I even, thanked him the first time I met him. I said if it wasn't for him, I probably would have ended up with like initials like an AJ Finn. But I was like, oh, Riley Sager. I was like, well, a gender neutral pen name. I'm like, and just, thinking of different stuff. And Avery was something that's, can go male, female, and it's not really a common name, so it sticks out. And honestly, the last name initially, I think right before we had gone out to shop around Girl Gone Mad at the time, I think the last name was actually going to be Dunn, Dunn. And for whatever
Hmm.
reason, and it's a long story, but I ended up changing it like last minute. I'm like, how about Bishop instead? And my agent's like, yeah, no, that's so much better. So that's how it came about. But yeah, I mean, there's no connection because talking about with Todd, like yeah, I think like Seger, I think was like a family name or you know what I mean? Like it has for me,
That's
and
a
I guess it's
great name. It's a
like
great
there's
name. It's
really
well
no
thought. Yeah.
familial connection at all. It was purely more marketing standpoint type thing.
Yeah. Well, that's how
But
and
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, like my editor for Every Last Fear, he was, we have this strange story that um he was in marketing at my publisher. He wasn't an editor.
This is
And
Joe.
Joe, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He's had a great trajectory, and I take full credit for it, but he will do with that. But anyway, long story short, we met at Thriller Fest and we hit it off, and we would basically be drinking friends. And there was at some point when I finished my last legal thriller, he pulled me aside and said, "Look, you're doing like I really like your work, And he kind of leaned me, as my agent did, away from the legal thrillers. And at some point, it was like, "Are you working on anything?" And I had been at this in Mexico, and I told him, "Well, I have this idea," and he's like, "That sounds pretty good. Like maybe we can do something together." And so this guy, and he's younger, much younger than me, um, he basically came up with the whole Finlay package and convinced his bosses at St. Martin's to give him a shot as an editor, never edited a book before, on an author who hadn't made them any money. Um, and his marketing plus natural editorial instincts uh, just all came together, and it just worked great. And we did Every Last Year and The Night Shift together. And he then got like basically stolen and by another publisher, and now he has his own imprint, and he's still
Yeah.
very young.
Atlantic
And
Crime.
Atlantic Crime, and
Yeah.
his latest acquisition. He's got an eye for people, and his latest Henry Wise won the Edgar for debut. He's just got a great slate of authors. I couldn't be more happy for him. And he always says like, yeah, we took a bet on each other, and it really paid off. And so I can't begrudge him that he left, and I'm just kind of really happy for him that success just keeps coming his way.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I felt bad. I think I had at Thriller Fest last time when you introduced me. I think I had a couple drinks because I'm like, oh yeah, the guy that abandoned you. I think I said that to him twice.
Yeah,
I
I say
felt
that all the
bad.
time. I say that all the time. So he's got a
So,
good.
well, let's talk about a little bit. Okay, going back to the drafting thing. So, okay, so you're not really one to, outline. It's not like a Jeffrey Deaver where you spend a lot of time on an outline.
I wish.
But how about like, do you keep a character list? I mean, especially, I mean, like, or like, how do you guess maintain certain aspects of the book as you're, like 200 some pages in,
Yeah.
or is it just all in your head?
It starts off all in my head, and the characters kind of come, and then I write multi point of view. books, and like Parents Weekend had like more characters than I could keep track of. Um, and my next book has two point of view characters. Like that's how much Parents Weekend just got to me. Um, but at some point I'm pretty basic. Like I want the story to make sense to readers. I don't want them to be confused, and that's really the challenge of kind of taking them in some person's head, then another, and kind of mixing things up. So I will at some point basically take a sheet of paper and draw vertical lines down it for every character and just do a one sentence kind of view of like what happens in this chapter, what happens in this one. And I kind of gives me a big picture, and I'll move the jigsaw around a little bit. But other than that, that's the extent of the outlining I do. But I'm also a heavy editor, and I read the novel so many times before I turn it in. I can't keep count. I know I'm done when I just can't stand to look at it. I can't read another word of it. That's kind of my benchmark to go, okay, you've read it enough. And so I think I'm so immersed in it that I'm able to keep track of everybody and what's going on. And my law practice helps with that. Like appellate law, you basically have to take a mountain of like there's been a big trial, there's been all these motions, and I had years of just having to sift things down and distill them into a story, all
Yeah.
this mountain of data and testimony and all these things that I think it really helps with the fiction because it's just natural to me to kind of go, okay, I got a mountain of stuff. I gotta organize it in a way that's understandable, that tells a story, and that people will understand it immediately.
Yeah. I don't know about you. So, my office is littered with books. Like, this is just one little corner that's supposed to look nice staged for, when we do these live streams, but I got books everywhere. And I want to say I probably have all of your Alex Finlay books, but I never, so many books, never really. The great thing about doing these live streams is it gives me the excuse to finally start reading all these books that I've been like collecting over the years. So I finally started, picked up this one. I started reading this one, and then I started listening to Parents Weekend because I even told you at Thriller Fest, Parents Weekend, as far as I can tell, I don't know if like has there ever been a book specifically about Parents Weekend? Because in this type of in like the suspense thriller field, there's just so many books, and so it's always refreshing when you come up with like a new setting or whatever. And as far as I could tell, I don't think like the idea of a Parents Weekend had ever really been done before.
Yeah, I don't know that it's done, and that's my challenge. I always, for every book, I try and like it's hard because there's so many great writers out there, and our genre is filled with talented people. But I always want to have um, something that's a little different, and so Parents Weekend came to me when I was at Parents Weekend for my son. I based the book at his college, though I'm surprised he hasn't been kicked out yet for it. But that's when I know that I'm going to write the book when it's like something a little different I haven't seen. There's elements you've seen, like the night shift, you've seen Final Girl kind of stories, but I did think I put a different twist on it, and I'm always trying to do that. And but yeah, so I forgot the question,
Well, yeah, I mean, so basically, I was just saying, Parents Weekend's a great. Well, the reason I bring it up is because I'm reading this, I'm listening to Parents Weekend, and of course, for anybody who has read those books, there is a character that appears in both. And then I also had a copy here of Night Shift, which I haven't read this, but I think, kind of know a little bit of what it's about, and there's reference to that. And so I'm like, is he writing like a series? So basically, it's, I don't think it's a spoilers or anything, but like, can you talk about Agent Keller? Like, how like was that initially from Every Last Fear? Was that
Yeah.
initially supposed to be a character that was going to be, coming in and out of other books, or that just kind of came about?
No, Keller was never meant to be. I don't view the books as a series because I like that. I don't love series myself, and I like to think you can pick up any of these books and you don't have to have read the other ones. It might be more satisfying
To be fair,
to
she's not like a main character. She
yeah.
like comes
She's
in.
she's the
Yeah.
law enforcement kind of. She's a story. She's kind of a necessary link in a lot of my stories because you having a law enforcement person helps in kind of moving the story forward, I have found. But no, Keller was in Every Last Fear. And I really like, I base Keller kind of on my wife a little bit. She's kind of, my wife's Keller's very no nonsense, very decent, and she has this bald, bumbling husband who,
Bob.
does his
So like,
best.
is Bob based
Bob,
on you then?
well, Bob is an idealized version of me. My wife would say, "No, you're not Bob," because people love Bob in these books. But so in Every Last Fear, I had them, and I had never planned to do them ever again. But Every Last Fear did really well, broke out for me, and I had the second book, and there's a phrase in our business is sophomore slump. Like you have a book that does well. I don't know what the percentages are, but it's not insignificant that the next book does not do very well. There's a slump. Um, and I wrote a whole book, second book, and 3 months before my deadline, I just knew it wasn't very good. And I knew it was certainly didn't live up to Every Last Fear. And so I called my agent and I basically said, told her what I just said. And she said, well, all right, well, have you told Joe? No, I don't know what we should talking about. And I said, well, no, I wanted to get your feedback. And she said, well, let's talk to Joe. We've got the books due in 3 months. And I called Joe and I told him, and to his credit, he said, well, do you have any other ideas? And I said, well, I've been I wrote this prologue that I think is pretty good, and I have this idea for the story. And he said, all right, send it to me. And I sent him what is the prologue for the night shift. And he said, email back and said, I want to read this book. You go write it, I'll deal with the timing. But we don't have the full, right. So I had this pressure to write a book in basically 3 or 4 months. Um, and so in the process for writing Night Shift, it was just natural. Like I needed a law enforcement person. I liked writing Keller, and it fit the story. So I put her in that book. And that's been one of my most successful books, The Night Shift. But I wrote it in lightning speed. And then I put her aside and didn't think I was going to write her again. And then Parents Weekend, there was just a need for a law enforcement person, and she naturally came about again. I don't know that I'll deal with her again. She's kind of I'm hopeful if they're ever going to make a TV series about the books, it's going to be Keller, and she's all wrapped up in the Hollywood machine with that. But I don't see another book unless it just really really fits perfectly.
Yeah, so you mentioned before your first legal thriller, you had written another novel that did not sell, and you just said here essentially you were writing a book between Every Last Fear and the Last Shift or the Night Shift. Um, are there other books that you had started that you've had to abandon, or were those just the other two?
Those are the two. The
Those are the
one
two.
early one, and then the one after the that was going to be the second Finlay book. I will say there are parts of that book I mined for scenes, and so it wasn't a total waste. But ultimately, it wasn't. It just I knew it, and I think Joe was willing to go to bat on it because I think he knew it too, and he really loved the premise of the night shift. Um, but yeah, you don't know, like you're invested. You're written, 2/3 of this book, and you're kind of feeling like maybe it's not right, but the deadline's creeping, and so I was happy to have a team that supported, like, okay, let's just not go through the numbers and turn it in, and they'll publish it and you'll tank, and that'll be the end of it. They really stuck by me, and that's why I'll always be grateful to Joe. But I said I would never leave my agent. It's one of the many reasons.
No, and I think that's a smart thing to. Some writers in your position would just, suck it up and finish the book and hope for the best. Where again, if in your gut you feel this book just isn't really working, yes, have a conversation with your agent, have a conversation with your editor. because it clearly worked out well for you. I mean, there could be a sliding doors world where maybe that book comes out and it does
Yeah,
bomb, and basically the Alex Finlay brand was over from
yeah,
there.
yeah.
So
I believe that would have happened. I really believe it would have happened, which is why I'm not normally one. I like to be a good author for my publisher and not create issues. Like, I really feel like early in my the early in the writing career with the Franz books, I had the opportunity to talk to Lee Child quite a bit through ITW, and he was great with the debut authors program and giving advice. And something he had said to me basically was of the effect of, look, you know, the publishers are going to do things that make you angry. They're going to make mistakes. You're going, but you got to recognize they're all in it for you to succeed. And if you're forgiving and you treat everyone like this is the family, um, that's the long game because they're going to stick by you when things go a little when you have slumps. And I really took that to heart, and I like to be that author that like I don't raise a fuss. I don't, you know, I I give my 2 cents, but would defer to the experts on marketing on this and that. Um, I think it's done well for me and my relationship with my publisher. Um, and so it took a lot to like go to them and say, I'm like, I have a book due in 3 months, and I think we should scrap it. But they were great.
yeah. A little bit more geeky writer stuff. This one written in third person past tense. Night Shift, Parents Weekend, I'm not really 100% sure of the other ones. Those are in present tense. Is that one of those things where at this point, do you just sitting down, just kind of instinctively know,
Yeah.
okay, this is going to be present? I mean, like, how do you make that decision? And has it ever changed maybe a couple chapters in or 50 pages in or somewhere along the line where you realize, it'd be better in a different tense?
Yeah. Well, Night Shift, I mean, Every Last Fear was kind of like the France books, which was third person past, and which was what all the books had read and how I was thought of, right? And the Night Shift, when I wrote that prologue I mentioned, it was in present tense for whatever reason. I was, under the gun. I was, I'd written it, just kind of on the view that like I need to have something, another idea other than the scrapbook I wrote. And it just felt right. And I haven't left it since. It just feels right. My personal view is that for my books, it makes them more present. It makes them move faster. It makes you feel like you're in it more. I don't know if that's right, but that's how I feel when I'm writing it. So I don't see changing that. I haven't done a first person novel yet, and I'd like to do that sometime. But this basically since the night shift on, all the books are present tense third person.
Yeah. What has your ratio been with like your titles versus the publisher coming in and saying, nah, we're going to call it something else?
Um, Well, the best title I've come up with was Parents Weekend. I think that's
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
it's a great title.
yeah, yeah. That title and that premise of all my books at the time, it was a hardest book I've written. I joked it nearly killed
Because
me.
to be
So
clear, for people who haven't read it, I mean, you have, like you said, there are a lot of characters, a lot of different parents. We're jumping
mhm,
around from all
yeah,
these different point of views,
yeah,
and it takes place. Well, again, I won't give too much away, but essentially takes place what over like the weekend.
a weekend. Yeah,
A weekend,
yeah,
obviously, yeah, duh.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, there is so many. I mean, what's like 70 chapters? The book is
yeah,
probably a little over 70,000 words. So I mean, there's a
yeah.
lot of jumping around there.
It's a lot going on. And the premise of the book is, for those who haven't read it, is Parents Weekend at a college, which is a rite of passage for first year college students in the US. And these five families their kids are all assigned to the same dorm. So the dorm separates them out into small group dinners for this Parents Weekend. And the parents go to the restaurant, the bar, and they're having fun, having drinks, meeting each other, and none of the kids show up. And so, at first everyone thinks it's just college kids being college kids, they're at a party, whatever. But as night falls and there's not so much as a text from any of these five students, panic starts to ensue in this small community. And I got that idea, as I said, at an actual parents' weekend at my son's college, which is where I said it. But yeah, it's got five families, and each family has members, and we get in the heads of each family member over this weekend. And it was very concerning to me that it would be understandable, that it wouldn't be too choppy, and all these things. And it was very difficult to write. So much so, like my blood pressure was up. I was like, and my I mentioned Sarah Pekkanen earlier. She lives. We used to be in the same neighborhood, live in the same neighborhood, but we've become very good friends. My wife, I don't know. We got together, and she was like, "You don't look so great," and I was explaining the book and how it was due, and she was like, "You know what? Let's just get together and this week, and I'll sit with you." And basically, she sat with me. Um, one full day in person where we went chapter by chapter, one full next day via Zoom where we went chapter by chapter. And she really helped deal with the things I had anxiety about, but just kind of lower the temperature and give me some more confidence. So, and she's a reflection, like she's a great buddy of mine, and but she is a reflection of, I think, the thriller writing community in general. Is that even though we're competitors and technically, we've all been through this tough business and the ups and downs and the rejection that I think it breeds a lot of empathy, a lot of camaraderie. But she went above and beyond, and I'm, super thankful. Pick up her new book. She's phenomenal.
Yeah. In the time remaining, what can you tell us about the upcoming book, the one, the anniversary?
Yeah, the anniversary, as I said, I went from Parents Weekend, which had like 20, 5 points of view to 2 points of view. The anniversary is um it's the I haven't practiced this enough yet because I haven't had to, but um, the premise is that a serial killer strikes on the same day every year, May 1st. And the story is told over a 10-year period, but we get only a glimpse of that day, May 1st. So it's May 1st, 1992. And we follow these two characters, these two high school students at first, over a 10-year period, who have a um, basically cross paths with this killer. And it's May 1st, 1993, May 1st, 1994. And that's the book. It's one day over a 10-year period each year, with these two characters. And over that period, the story kind of unfolds and the mystery unfolds, and we find out who the killer is and why and all those fun things.
And what's the publication date for that?
I think it's May 12th, 2026.
Okay,
And
so I'm in May.
yeah.
And then you mentioned the ITW, which is a great organization for any, I guess, writers out there aspiring or, old-time writers, career writers. If you write thrillers, it's definitely something to look into. Thriller Fest is great. It is in New York. It is expensive, so there is a thing. However, you do have, there's Pitch Fest, Craft Fest. You and David Ellis kind of do some type of like teaching. Can you talk really quick just about, where because again, you mentioned before being in the debut class. You probably never thought you would be teaching some classes. I mean,
No,
can you
no,
talk a little bit
yeah.
about kind of what you do there?
Yeah. No, I'm a huge fan of international thriller writers. I have been with this organization since the first book under my own name, 2012. Debut. I still remember the debut. There's a debut authors program, where they really give a lot of attention to debuts. And there's a big debut author breakfast where like a big name author introduces you. I go to it every year. I get choked up every year when the people get up and tell their journeys. Um, and but the what I never did before I started writing was, and I don't know that it's kind of evolved the organization, but currently the first half of the conference is all for not unpublished writers, but writers who are trying to get an agent or want to learn the craft. And so there is craft fest classes taught by best-selling authors for several days. It is expensive, but I think it's an investment in your career and yourself. Um, and then there's opportunities to pitch to agents at the end of this craft fest, pitch fest period. And then it moves to where Robert and I met at Thriller Fest, which is more kind of like a trade conference for nerdy thriller writers, where we were on panels and things like that. But I can't say enough about it. And MWA is another great organization. Um, their conference, VoucherCon, is more, I think, reader focused than writer focused, but it is great as well. But I've had a great one. David Ellis and I, I mentioned, we became super fast friends, and we taught a class last year at Craft Fest. We're going to teach one in May of next year, and but don't go to our class. There's some great teachers at this thing, and I wish I would have had it because I think it would have cut years off of just learning by kind of mistake that I experienced.
Yeah, I think I remember talking to Joe Fender, and he's not really involved in the whole, day-to-day operations of ITW anymore. But I was like, you guys have Pitch Fest, Craft Fest, but they're really the thing about I think being a writer, especially if you want to do it as a profession, is no one really ever talks about the business aspect of it. It's always about like, oh, this is how you write a book or how you write, you find an agent, but no one really explains like this is what a contract is. This is what, the advance is broken up, maybe in three parts, some depending on, it might even be more. And, like this is how much you're going to pay in taxes and what you have to write. So I just kind of feel like that is something that never really gets discussed a lot. People never really want to talk about the business aspect of the whole writing game.
Yeah, and I think there are courses now at Craft Fest on that more than there used to be. Maybe they could use more, but I also think you learn a lot because the community is so welcoming that you learn a lot just through the informal conversations. And you speak of Joe Thinder. I met him at Thriller Fest. He blurbed at The Advocate's Daughter when the first Friends book didn't sell at all, and he took his time and we, I've been on panels with him since and gotten to know him, but he's just a great kind of I don't say elder because he's not that old, but elder statesman of ITW and of the thriller writing community. But he represents really the best of of that community because I do think that it is I've gotten to know, trust me, other genres, and thriller mystery, in my view, is the openness, the supportiveness is different.
Speaking of panels, we need, oh man, I almost forgot about this. You mentioned, coming up, obviously being a lawyer, reading the firm or whatever else. You were on a panel this past year with
Yeah.
John Grisham. How did that happen?
I was as surprised as anyone else. I was super excited about it because of my John Grisham kind of, when I was in law school, literally the firm came out your first year as a lawyer in law school is like a intense experience, one you never forget. But the movie The Firm came out, and I remember going with all my classmates. Went to the midnight show of The Firm, Tom Cruise, and the next week everybody's wearing like glasses and suspenders like Tom Cruise was wearing in the movie. So it was a special night. He's super gracious. Everything I'd hoped he would be. So it was great to be on a panel with him. And I still read every book he writes. He's just and he doesn't need to write any books anymore. He could just go off in his small town of Virginia and coach baseball and do the things he loves and do nothing else. But he still loves it. And yeah, so it was great. That panel was an all-star. It wasn't just, Grisham obviously was a stalwart, but you know, Lisa Gardner, who's become a really good friend, amazing, kind of iconic thriller writer. David Morrell was on the panel. It was just a great moment for me.
Yeah. All right. So in the time remaining, I want to call you Anthony because that's how I know you, but I guess we're here you as Alex. But
People have
Anthony, Alex, is there any recent thing you've read recently, watched, listened to, anything you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of debuts that have, when I get asked to blurb, I really prioritize debuts because it meant so much to me at the time. Uh, so I've read a lot. None of the ones that come to mind are out yet. I should be better about this. As far as Books I read, an unusual book I read was I love the M. Night. I always mispronounce the last name,
Oh, M. Night
Shyamalan.
Shyamalan, the Nicholas Sparks one.
Yeah, yeah, I read that. I quite liked it, and I didn't know what to expect, and I haven't read Nicholas Sparks, and I thought Nicholas Sparks could be a thriller writer. He writes really lean
Yeah.
yeah, tight prose. So I read that. I quite liked it. As far as shows go, I just watched what's her name from Homeland. Why am I missing
Oh,
the
the beast
yes, yes.
inside me
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something.
Beast Inside. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That. It's quite good. So those are the two that come to mind. How about you? I'm always looking for recommendations.
I haven't gotten to that Netflix show yet, but my wife and I did watch Death by Lightning, which was really
Oh,
well
yeah.
done.
Good. I gotta check that out.
And the new Mick Herron show, enjoying the Down Cemetery Road.
Let's
You
see
know,
what.
because the Slow Horse is just such a fun show, and so this is a little bit type of different, but still, Emma Thompson is just hilarious in it as Zoe.
We'll,
So,
we'll
but
check that out.
all right, my friend. I don't want to keep it any much more of your time. I know you are a very busy man.
Yeah. Yeah.
If people want to stalk you online, what's the best way to do it?
I'm heavy on Instagram, very little elsewhere. At Alex Finlay, author, and that's the best place. And yeah, but thank you, Robert. It's great. I'm glad this is going so well for you. And I don't know how you find time with writing the books and doing this, it's I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. So thank you again for your time. And people, if you haven't read this one yet, go track this one down or The Night Shift and the other ones I have on ebook, so I can't hold those up. Thanks again, Alex, and we'll see everybody next time. Bye.